Okay, for those of you who have attended the most recent IBAA talk, you know I was engaging in a self-designed little circle of talk. Yes, I'm using the thank you. I'll just put it here. Will that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm using the novices questions. I'm sorry?
It's better to put it.
You have to do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the abbot cannot hear otherwise.
All right. All right. So I'm using the novices questions, 10 of them in all, to schedule my IBA talk. So far, we have done 3 parts. And as you know, I started with that all beings will have to survive on food, nutrients. That's question 1. What is what? All beings need to survive on nutrients. Then it comes to what is 2? Nama Rupa. That all beings essentially can boil down to 2 parts, mental and physical parts. And the last time I talked about 3 feelings. This Nama Rupa, if you were to start with meditation and start trying to discover the ultimate reality, where do you start? We usually start with feeling. And now we have come to what is 4. And guess what? I haven't given it too much thought when I started with what is 1, what is 2, what is 3. You know, this is easy, I can do it. Then I started to feel really a lot of regret when it comes to 4, the 4 Noble Truths. Understandably, why? Because if we were to make it simple, we can skip this part. This is just a background understanding that where this novice's questions came from. And our time is limited, so we can skip that. The 4 Noble Truths, if we were to be concise, just 1 sentence. And this is personally dispensed by the Buddha himself. That what is Buddhism? Or what does the Buddha actually teach? It's just 1 sentence. It's all about dukkha and cessation of dukkha. Like in better terms, the English users routinely translate the dukkha into suffering. Although personally I tend to disagree with that. It's the inherent satisfactory nature of conditioned things. We call it dukkha. So 1 sentence. Doesn't mean we're done. I can go home now while we're standing here. But then if we were to elaborate the 4 Noble Truths, the entire Tripitaka would have to be elaborated, because the entire Tripitaka is about the 4 Noble Truths. And so there need to be a compromise, a middle way, if you will. So tonight, my presentation is choosing a somewhat unusual perspective in covering the 4 Noble Truths. This is just the start, although we'll come back to this frequently. It's all about dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. But there's one particular sutra, especially in the Pali tradition. This was the first sermon that Buddha dispensed immediately after he achieved enlightenment. And it's called Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, or Sutta. Here, the context documented by this particular sutra will be very interesting, okay, beyond doctrinal concerns, if you read into it carefully. And tonight I would like to address those parts so that you can relate a little bit more realistically the 4 Noble Truths to your actual meditation practices. I hope I can convey that effectively. No guarantee though. Alright, so the 4 Noble Truths, 2 things deserve mentioning from the very beginning. Now, this was the first sermon that Buddha gave personally to 5 of his former companions. And there were several anomalies. I call it anomaly, not in the sense that this is something un-Buddhist, no, in the sense that it somewhat deviates from our general understanding. Number one, when Buddha dispensed this so-called Four Noble Truth, according to this sutra, he didn't use the term, the title, noble. Instead, it was simply the Four Truths. That deserves some attention. We'll come to that later. And secondly, this particular sutra happens with 2 episodes prior to the dispensation of the Four Truths. And those particular episodes clearly indicate that meditation was strongly associated with the dispensation of the so-called Dharma wheel turning, translated into English. This somewhat evaded due attention from previous researchers. So let me start. First, the Four Truths. For now, let's dispense with the Four Noble Truths, okay? The first truth need to be fully understood. So, it's doctrine. And the so-called first truth, of course, is the impermanent nature of all conditioned things. Precisely because it's impermanent, and then we decided to grasp the impermanent things and take it as if it is or it can be permanent. That gives rise to dukkha. That's one, the first truth, and the second truth. So impermanent things by themselves really wasn't problematic. That's how things work, and how things are, and how things will be. It's our clinging that was creating the problem. That part, I believe, is well grasped by all of you. That's the first part, dukkha, the emergence of dukkha. And then the second part, indicating it is possible that this dukkha can be removed, stopped from re-emergence. That's the third truth. And importantly, it said this need to be realized. Later on, when I cover the contextual documentation of the Dharma wheel turning sutta, you will see why I emphasize this. The truths need to be realized by every and each individual intending to achieve the ultimate truth and gaining enlightenment. But what did the Buddha do to convince people to do that after his enlightenment? That should be of crucial importance. Where do we find that? That sutta has documentation, but you need to pay closer attention. And there's a path. Arguably, the Noble Eightfold Path is the middle way. Nobody would argue that, whatever yana you belong to. Okay? But the important thing is that truth needs to be developed again through a systematic way. In theory, that way was dispensed to the 5 former companions of the Buddha. But if you read the sutta carefully, there were clear indications those 5 were not convinced. So what happened? Those were interesting parts and interesting angles I intend to address. So, first, the Buddha did not start his sermon saying, here is the middle way, not even the Four Truths. Instead, he started his dispensation with what? Avoiding the 2 extremes. And this has to do with his past experience. As we know, that he used to be a crown prince. He really lived a luxurious life. Okay? He had first-hand experience about what lust is, what worldly pleasure is. He abandoned that. So that was using his personal example that particular extreme, meaning indulging in worldly pleasure, is not going anywhere. Then, after that, he studied under two particular teachers. Aradakama, where he achieved high level of meditative achievement, and the teacher actually said that you and I are now equal. There's no difference between us. Stay, teach my student with me. And the Buddha was not satisfied. He believed that this was not what he was pursuing. So he started to, let's just say he went on his pursuit and met another teacher called Uddaka Ramaputta. And under this particular teacher, he achieved even higher level of meditative achievement. And again, the teacher said, now we are equal. Stay, teach my student with me. And again, he left. Under both circumstances, he had to also practice high level of austere life. He experienced that what exactly extreme austerity can be. And after that, after he left those teachers, he actually pushed that austere life into extreme. That there were documentation, I believe, perhaps not in this particular sutta and elsewhere, that over years he lived such a hard life that you can see the bones, okay, the ribs protruding out of his belly, and he didn't take baths for years. That you can see dirt falling off from his skin. That kind of austerity. And here is the interesting part. These two extremes, immediately after his enlightenment, he tried to persuade his former disciples, former companions, so-called five bhikkhus, that kind of extreme need to be avoided. So, why it need to be avoided? So as to reach awakening. Essentially, he was telling them that, look, I claim right now, even though you may not be convinced, I have achieved enlightenment. And this is not because I have changed my mind, but because I had decided that the two extremes were unproductive in achieving that awakening, that I decided to change my mode of practice. That's how he persuaded the five bhikkhus. And here is the interesting questions. Avoiding the two extremes were brought up, conveyed to the four former companions. And we're going to address this particular part in some greater details. Okay, those monastics who later, after the Buddha enlightened them, okay, eventually become arahants. But who exactly were they? Why, in the first place, they were the Buddha's companions, and later on they abandoned him? That would be the interesting part. So, there were two stories about the five monastics. One story says that these were four former servants that the Buddha's father, when he was still a crown prince, sent to serve him. Well, if that was the case, then when the Buddha changed his mode of practice, those five servants should not be allowed to leave him, abandon him. So the second theory was that those should have been four former co-practitioner under his second meditation teacher, Uddaka Ramaputta. Upon seeing Buddha's quick achievement under that teacher, they believed this was an extraordinary practitioner, and they believed he had good reason to leave that teacher and seek him pursuing his own goal. So they decided to stay with him. But then later on, when he decided to change his mode of practice, those five believed that he was abandoning the original goal. Instead of recognizing that he was only changing the mode of practice instead of abandoning the original goal. Now, I have to give credit to this version of story to Ananias. I didn't make that up. This was based on his own research and his own hypothesis, if you will. But it makes good sense. Okay? Suppose we follow that line. What happened next? It's even more interesting. We'll come to that later. Before meeting the five accused and sort of pull them over to his side. After Buddha's enlightenment, there were two things happen. One in silence, one in verbal conversation. This is why I need to mention those two teachers. I believe most of you are familiar with the story that upon his enlightenment, the Buddha first thought about those two former teachers. And he believed that he should try to help them achieve higher attainment. Unfortunately, those two have passed away. A clear indication that an enlightened person obviously should think about paying back the goodwill of all those who had helped. That was embodied by Buddha's example, done in silence. The second is that before he went on searching for the five bhikkhus, he met one particular human being, and this conversation happened immediately after his enlightenment. So this was the first conversation he engaged in after his enlightenment. And take a look what happened. That fortunate person name was Upaka. This is what he said in great admiration to the Buddha. Take a look. Your countenance, my friend, is clear and serene. Your complexion is pure and bright. In whose name have you gone forth? Who is your teacher? Or whose teaching do you profess? If you read the original Pali text, you will discover that the context that this person admired Buddha's complexion so much that he was almost immediately ready to convert himself. I'll be seeking refuge to you immediately. But then, see, take a look at the Buddha's response. Okay, he was enlightened, was fully confident, so he's just tell the truth. I am one who has overcome all, who knows all. I am one who has overcome all, and blah, 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 blah. And guess what that guy responded? He said, may it be so. Translated into modern American English, he said, whatever. And left, totally unconvinced. Now, this may sound paradoxical. The Buddha was totally enlightened, no doubt about it. And he met the first human being, obviously deeply impressed by his enlightenment given the outer experience. And yet, when he proclaimed the truth that he had no master, he learned from nobody else, he achieved the enlightenment on his own. That person was totally unconvinced and left. The message, again, I'm drawing from Analayo's perspective, and I agree with him totally, that enlightenment or prior to enlightenment, highly achieving meditative masters included, does not guarantee that you dispense the doctrine effectively. It's still other training. It requires other training. Okay, so that's the message. Even the Buddha needed better communication, which also explains why he had to spend the next 45 years trying to convince people. Now, of course, if you track those dispensations, you will discover he became more and more effective. All right, so he spoke to this first person, didn't work too well. Then that's back to those 5 former companions. Unsurprisingly, they were even more highly skeptical because these 5 former companions, in the first place, had lost confidence in him. They truly believed that he had abandoned his goal. And now, the Buddha said, not only had I not abandoned the goal, but I am trying to give you the right instruction to prove that I changed my mode of practice and I've achieved enlightenment. I'm going to share that with you. Okay, that was the message. This happened 3 times. The Buddha dispensed the 4 truths, saying that there are only impermanent things are dukkha, and you have to avoid that. Therefore, you can pave the good way, the middle way, and eventually achieve enlightenment. 3 times, they rejected Buddha. Evidently, the inefficacy of asceticism, austerity, extreme austerity, how inefficient it can be, need to be tackled, either verbally or physically, but you just need to find a better way. Here, the Pali Canon and the Chinese parallel has a variance. In the Pali Canon, the dispensation, the dialogue between the Buddha and the 5 former companions were bundled into one sutra. Namely, he dispensed 4 truths, and they rejected him, and then he went on talking. But in the Chinese parallel, it was separated into 2 sutras. How important that can be. The Chinese parallel also included one particular paragraph that after trying to persuade those 4 former companions unsuccessfully, the Buddha used his supernatural power, trying to discover whether those 5 people are ready mentally to accept the doctrine. The Pali I believe, did not contain that particular paragraph. So, if you want to make an argument that is meditative achievement absolutely necessary, how useful it can be, here is a good indication that how useful it can be, okay, using Buddha's own example. So, be that as it may, eventually, the Buddha conveyed the message, and one by one, those 4 former companions decided that, yes, the way that the truths were expressed, and again, the outer outlook of the enlightened Buddha really gave them the convincing evidence that he must have spoken the truth. Having left behind those 2 modalities, extreme austerity and worldly pleasure, the Buddha has discovered that essential path lead to the attainment of full awakening is the Eightfold Path. That's the current version. Early on, the indication, not in this particular sutta, but in another sutta, probably happened in somewhat later time, okay, indicated there were further deeper meaning about leaving the 2 extremes beyond world pleasure and austerity. Actually, here, you can find the evidence in some Sutta Nikaya, okay, elsewhere. The 2 extremes, instead of referring to worldly pleasures and extreme austerity, also indicating 2 other extremes, namely existence and non-existence. Those were also 2 extremes need to be avoided because it's also part and parcel of the dependent origination, the entire underlying embedded doctrine of the Four Noble Truths. So, in addition to choosing a different lifestyle, doctrinally, avoiding the 2 extremes also need to be understood and to be realized is that avoiding the 2 extremes in terms of existence and non-existence. What does that mean? Emptiness. Conditioned things do not have intrinsic existence. This part, again, all the time being ignored. So, let's switch back a little bit.
I'm going to use the scroll.
Scroll.
Yeah, this one's not good.
Okay. All right. So it was 4.
This one's better. Let me go back. It's easier.
Oh, yeah, thank you. The question brought up here is that why is it there are only 4? Not more, not less. And then why eventually the title of noble were being added on. The general convention in Buddhism is that when something, a term, for example, being added into noble something, that means it's a general applicable principle, applies to all. When there is no such title, noble, meaning it's something specific. Say, I'm giving a lecture, saying blah, blah, blah. Give you a lecture addressing the same thing, but I'll say it differently. When something like that happened, we wouldn't say this is the noble something, okay? So this is why I have to say that why the Dhamma Will-Turning Sutra in the first place did not use the 4 noble truths, referring those 4 truths, but instead just the 4 truths, indicating the possibility that those 4 truths were initially, on the spot, okay, intent to persuade the 5 born companions. But later on, over time, because it's so important, it's been repeated so many times, it becomes a general applicable principle, becomes the 4 noble truths. All right, so that was what noble means. In the very famous Visuddhimagga, I believe Venerable Bodhisattva had offered an excellent answer why it is noble, because it was realized by the noble one, and it can only be realized by the noble one, so it got to be noble. And as to why there are only 4, one more, the entirety of the 4 noble truths will become misguided. One less, it would not be complete. Again, if we were to elaborate even on that point, the entire Tripitaka would need to be elaborated. We're not going to do that, okay? So, stay with me with that brief elaboration. The 4 and the noble, that's what it means. But what I want to emphasize is that because most of us are more interested in how do we put that into practice. So let's give a little bit more attention on this particular aspect. Dukkha need to be understood. You learn, you hear the Dhamma from the teacher. That also requires action. Origin of suffering be abandoned, obviously again by you and you alone. And how do you know it needs to be abandoned? It first requires some trust. You trust that eventually there's such thing as enlightenment because at least one human being has accomplished that. Okay? Our situation as of now, even after 2,500 years later, look pretty similar to those 5 bhikkhus. Okay? We did not witness that enlightenment firsthand. But out of trust, we believe that it happened. And then we decided that perhaps we can make it happen again. So, yes, we understand the doctrine, we understand the origin, and then we decided that such goal can be realized, and we also accept the fact that the realization of that goal requires long-term practice. Systematically, that is the 4 truths, path of cessation of dukkha. Put it together, essentially, it means not only the Four Noble Truths is the core element of Buddhist doctrine, it also indicates the entirety of practice. You go ahead understanding it and practice simultaneously until in the end, the understanding becomes experiential. It's part of your actual experience. The second part of this slide, okay, like I said earlier, beyond those two extremes indicating the worldly pleasure and extreme austerity, there's a second implication about the two extreme existence and non-existence. The second part of this slide indicating a clear step-by-step process in terms of what would happen if you actually take on the path. Now, of course, this is the so-called 12 dependent origination most of you are quite familiar with. It was with the existence of ignorance, formation comes into being. With the existence of formation, consciousness comes into being, and go on and on and on. Eventually, there is worry, sorrow, and pain. All right, we are more interested in how to reverse that particular cycle that comes here. First, insight. Ignorance, not in the sense that you know nothing, you're uneducated, no. Ignorance only referring to that you haven't seen the true nature of conditioned things. What is that true nature? Impermanence, dependently conditioned. So insight into impermanence will bring craving to an end. That 12 links of dependent origination, if you can stop, if you can erase any one of the links, the entire cycle will be broken. Okay, we're just using one particular example. This altogether can be summed up by the middle way, so-called the Eightfold Noble Path. What does it do? Eventually, it will bring about liberation. Now again, even for elaborating the Eightfold Noble Path requires a whole semester, not even 1 hour. Okay, not to mention we have only about 40 minutes to elaborate Four Noble Truths. So let's skip this part. Okay. Okay with everybody? Okay. So it must be practiced, granted. More importantly, the way must be balanced. There are more than one factor. Okay, it's eightfold noble path. How do you strike a balance? Let's use simile. In the Pali tradition, you will often come across this particular simile that describing the human mind or the flow of consciousness as a rapid current, water current. And it is this turbulent water current that we need to get across from the chaotic side into the tranquilized side. And hopefully that will lead us eventually into enlightenment. So when trying to get across the rapid current, what could happen? Two possible results. First, for those people who were not even interested in taking any actions, this is what's going to happen. You drown. That's easily understandable. But then this part is more tricky. You want to get across quickly. What if you become careless and lose your balance? You still get drowned. And that is the indication for the Eightfold Noble Path. You need a balanced approach. In greater detail, the Eightfold Path actually can be incorporated with several other things, including how do you erase the 5 hindrances, the 5 aggregate subject to cleaning, pondering upon them one by one, and so on and so forth. That requires other elaborations. What I want to emphasize here again is that the four go hand in hand. Even though for the purposes of elaboration we separated them into two somewhat separate topics, but they go hand in hand. The Buddha himself personally indicated that with the realization, with the understanding, total understanding of dukkha, you would also understand the origin of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the path of the cessation. By the same token, understanding and realizing any one of them automatically mean you understand the other three. Otherwise, you haven't understood. Okay? That's the kind of balance we're talking about. And obviously, it requires first to understand the doctrine and then to take on the path. Really, there is no better way to express it other than these two, understanding and take up actions. So, grasping conjoined with craving. Earlier, I have indicated that impermanent things have nothing wrong with themselves because that's how things work. It's our grasping that becomes problematic. With grasping, there will be craving. Some things we feel pleasure in, we want more. Something displeases us, we want none of them. Okay? These kind of craving, that creates dukkha. And here is why I disagree with the translation of suffering, because it's only limited to one aspect of dukkha. Dukkha actually means the inherently unsatisfactory nature of conditioned things. So due to condition and changing nature of things, they can never yield lasting satisfaction. Why are you still pursuing them? It is really the core message that the Buddha tried to convey to us. Without accepting this, either out of confidence or out of trust, without accepting this, you will not be able to go on. Suppose you have accepted this, what happened? Let me jump quickly. Now, not knowing the truth, of course, starting from ignorance, lead to dukkha. And then, with confidence in the attainable nibbana or nirvana, with that kind of confidence, that will start the journey of reversing the path. With the confidence, you will pay wide attention to the right object. Those of you who are familiar with meditation, this indicates clearly that which particular path you are taking on. With the right attention, there will be right mindfulness, guarding the faculties. That essentially talks about precepts, moral training, and eventually produce virtues. Guarding morality, and then because you are guarding your faculty, curbing the outflow of so-called mental volitional formations, and you are guarding your morality, not doing those things that shouldn't be done, you will feel no regret in your life. Because of that, your mind feels calm, and therefore there will be delight. Again, those of you who are familiar with meditative practices, delight and joy will be very, very essential for the next step, the achievement of concentration. And here is a clear indication how that happened. So, this again is a more detailed practitioner's guidance for the realization of the Four Noble Path. It started with confidence or some knowledge, and then it leads on to a meditative life, not just doctrinal understanding. Perhaps that was the most important message that Buddha intended to convey, and somewhat explicitly documented by the Dharma will turning sutra. But again, following Ananias' example, if you take a closer look, we can still excavate those hidden messages. All right, any question on this one? Okay. So the guidance is to be seen, and there's the urge to be treaded, to proclaim, need to be verified. What does this mean? That the Four Noble Truths actually would experience three turning. Okay? In addition to the first dispensation, you also have this. You have to see the guidance, you have to try the path, and then eventually, with your own attainment, you should be able to proclaim by yourself, this is the truth. I have seen, I have witnessed, I have experienced. So the Four Truths emphasize the analytical approach in the beginning and conveys pragmatism. So this is not just doctrine, abstract principles, but something that you can do and you must do. When you have taken the path, when you have achieved the ability to proclaim your own experience, there is a technical term in Buddhism describing that. And that brings us all the way back into why in the first place Buddha believed he should turn the wheel, the Dharma wheel. When you have achieved that kind of clear vision, they say your eyes, the so-called Dharma eye, are now without dust. It's because in the first place you don't see the real conditioned nature of conditioned things. They describe that in the simile that your eyes are being covered with dust. And now that ignorance, the dust has been removed. And therefore you can see things truly as they are. That kind of penetrating power is called the Dharma eye. Otherwise, in the Pali tradition, they call it direct knowledge because this is not reflected upon.
Sorry, I pen.
Oh.
My neck pen. I try but
Not a problem.
there. Sorry. Đọc quá trời. Đi cột đây. Ngồi ngọ lên bị mỏi. I pen my neck pen.
Oh, okay. No problem, you go rest.
I try to stay. Cannot do that.
That's fine.
Thank you. Sorry. Anh đại diện ấy, Mr. Yang
Yes.
present me, request me to welcome on you. Thank you. Sorry. Ồ, quá trời.
My happy year condition.
Okay. Cảm ơn cái báo quá, ngồi chung được.
Alright, I had actually also come to the last slide, so let's wrap it up quickly. When you are able to get the knowledge, when you have taken the path, and then gaining the direct knowledge, it is routinely called you have acquired the Dharma eye, the dustless Dharma eye. What happened usually means meditatively, you have been doing all this all the time, knowingly or unknowingly. Meaning what? Does what I am about to do lead to dukkha, or does it lead to liberation from dukkha? For those of you who have been engaging in meditative practices on your own, on a daily basis, you know this has been guiding your life. For those of you who have not done so, this is advised by Bhikkhu Ananayo that that's what you should be doing as a starter. If you're trying to realize, take the path of the Four Noble Truths, and trying to achieve the Dharma eye, dustless Dharma eye. Right, again, like I said earlier at the beginning of my presentation, I really feel regret I chose this topic, although it is unavoidable. Who am I to say anything about the Four Noble Truths? Still, there's some interesting information that I present tonight that I hope might be of some help to all of you. Right? Okay, now, question, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. Who's Pico Anaya?
Originally from Germany and ordained in Sri Lanka, I believe. And even today, he still routinely presides a lot of meditative retreats and also a full-time professor, I believe, in Hamburg University. Specialized in early Buddhism in particular, and recently he spent more of his time in doing comparative study using the Pali Sutras and if there exists, the Chinese parallel, okay, excavating some of the previously unknown or less well-known aspects. And several of my slides tonight drawn from his most recent publication, I believe under the title of something like Buddha's Life as a Meditator. Yeah.
It's just interesting.
He's written a lot of books on that.
Oh, he published a lot. Yes.
The way he analyzed the Eight Noble Path, it just slightly.
Yes, it's unusual.
It's unusual.
Yes.
Most of the texts, just condense those 8 to 3, Sila, Samadhi, and Russia, and all that.
We all know that.
But he's really this is more analytical aspect of each.
Yeah.
And he subsidizes it with the proper stories. And
Yes.
that's
Yeah. I'm glad you have picked up that point. That's precisely, I feel that it is interesting to share with everyone.
comments that,
Yeah.
on that one.
Okay, anything else?